Hello everyone, this is Rick and welcome to Astral Club. Today's episode is communicating with loved ones and solving crimes. Before we get into it, just want to mention Patreon. If you'd like to support the channel on Patreon, you can do so. You get advanced episodes on Sunday, a library of downloaded episodes for your favorite podcast app, and a Patreon email where we could talk back and forth. And if you're interested, there'll be a link in the description. Next up is private lessons. If you're interested in a lesson to learn how to astral project, I'll be more than glad to send you some information. There will be an email in the description where you can request that information from me. Okay, communicating with loved ones and solving crimes. These are two different questions from two different supporters of Astral Club. The first is Joseph. He is a Patreon supporter, and he asked me this question. He said, "Hey Rick, I found out my grandma passed away this morning. I have two questions. First, even though you are aware of the real nature of reality," and he said, "Me too, how do you deal with death? It feels weird because it's very sad, but I wonder why I feel as sad as I do. How can I project to her? It's been a handful of months since my last projection. Would making suggestions before sleep help?" Well, my answer is it's natural to feel the loss when a loved one leaves the physical world. And I grieve for your loss. I felt the loss of my wonderful grandmother, even though she visited me in spirit minutes after her passing to tell me that she had passed away. But that didn't mean that I didn't suffer the all too human feelings of loss when a loved one leaves the physical plane. Now, I may not have been as devastated as someone who believes that once someone passes in the physical, that's it. They disappear from all reality at that point. I can understand why those people would be devastated. But still, as a human, it was natural for me to feel feelings of loss and to work through that emotion. I remember that morning when the phone rang and a chill went down my spine. And I said to my mother, as she was going to answer the phone, that my grandmother had passed away. And she looked weirdly at me, but picked up the phone and got the news. Even as a parent, though, I felt sad when my little girl went off to college. Even though I knew she was going to a better place where she belonged, that didn't stop my human feelings because, someone that I loved, who was a part of my everyday life, would be going away to another place and spending time there learning and doing what she needed to be doing. So even in that situation where it's just a temporary parting, I still felt the loss. And I think anyone who's ever sent a child off to college or university would understand exactly how I feel. Now, his next part of the question was trying to communicate with this lost relative. I advise that, yes, astral projection to your ex-grandmother from the physical plane standpoint is the best way to communicate with them within the first month especially. However, in Joseph's case, his astral projections are very infrequent. So he was asking about what other steps might he take to get in contact. A lot has to do with how she passed. If she passed from a long illness, she may ascend very quickly to the healing plane, which is normally not accessible in any way by a living person. However, if they passed suddenly in relative good health, for instance, like my father-in-law did, he was fine, and then in the middle of the night, he just passed away quickly. So it was easier to get in contact with him. Of course, I did it through astral projection. But because he didn't go immediately to the healing plane, it was much easier. However, Joseph may not have this particular luxury due to his infrequent projections. So my advice to him is this. As you fall asleep, will yourself to your grandmother. Feel yourself appearing where she is now. Think about her perfume, her laughter, her talks with you. Try to feel her presence as sleep takes you. Alternatively, you can pay attention to your dreams. She may come to you in those dreams instead of you to her. Note that if she died suddenly, as I said earlier, if she died suddenly in relatively good health, her energy level will be higher and it'll be easier for her to contact you. If it was a long illness, she may have to go through a healing plane first before she can initiate contact with you. So you may have to be patient in that instance. But at any rate, all I can say to Joseph is good luck, and please accept my condolences for the passing of your loved one. Next up, Richard Gray, who is an Astral Club member, asked the following questions. Could astral projection be used to help with unsolved cases of unaliving? We have to be careful on the tube how many times we use certain words. I think we all know what we're talking about. Number 2, could astral projection be used to uncover archaeological finds? And number 3, could astral projection be used to see people like JFK, that German leader in World War II, funny mustache guy who must not be named, and Elvis, which is a interesting grouping of people. The only thing I can see in common amongst all 3 of them is they all died early from unnatural causes. But other than that, they're very different individuals. However, I could see where people, might want to catch a glimpse of these folks. My answer to his questions as a group is that, yes, it is theoretically possible to achieve your 3 goals that you mentioned. However, it would require a highly experienced projector committed to achieving these tasks. Practically speaking, I wouldn't want to approach the police saying that I had information on some unsolved unaliving. Why is that? Well, because they'll ask how I got this information. If I mentioned that I got it through astral projection, they'd probably check me off as a nutcase, or worse, as a murder suspect. Oh dear, I used the wrong word again. Oh well. At any rate, these are, you have to think like your average police officer, for instance. And they tend to be very straight-laced. Yes, I know there's tales of certain departments at certain times who engaged psychics to try to solve these types of tough cases, but those are the exceptions and not the rules. And approaching a police department with definite information about a baffling, unsolved case like this would most likely spark their suspicion than anything else. And especially if I started babbling on about astral projection, then they'd figure that I was probably, a nutcase who also happened to be someone who committed certain acts which would give him information about these particular cases. So unfortunately, as much as I'd like to be able to help in that area, I suspect that all that would do would be to complicate my life and the life of any other experienced projector who wanted to devote himself to this type of thing. Now, perhaps if you were friends with some high-up police official who trusted you and happened to have an open mind and knew about astral projection, then perhaps you could assist that situation. But I know from my standpoint, I don't know any police officers of any sort. And so it's just a whole area that I think would be problematic, to say the least. Next up, discovered artifacts. Let's say, for instance, that I wasn't extremely claustrophobic and without this paralyzing fear of being underground. I mean, I'll go into space, I'll travel in time, all kinds of stuff. I'll even go into the water if I have to. But I just don't like the idea of going into the earth. It freaks me out. It's a fear that's deeply rooted. But let's say that I was able to overcome that, and then to start going into random places, let's say in the Middle East, and going through the ground looking for objects. I mean, it's theoretically possible. However, what would I do with that information? Because archaeological digs are extremely expensive operations. There's a lot involved with getting the permission to dig from governments. There's always fees that must be paid. There's workers, there's tools, there's experienced, educated people. There's a lot involved. A lot of money is involved and must be raised in order to actually do a thorough archaeological dig. Now, imagine that you're a professor of archaeology at some prestigious university, and Rick approaches you and says, "Hey, I left my body and went into the earth, and I saw all of these artifacts, and here's where you want to go to dig." Now, this person, chances are, hasn't heard of astral projection or doesn't believe in it. So that's one strike against me already. Number two, he's going to ask me what my educational background is. Perhaps if I had a doctorate in archaeology, I might find some way to be taken seriously. However, my education is in business administration, not archaeology. So once again, let's face it, I'd be assigned to the Looney Tunes Club. I wouldn't be taken seriously. This is the world we live in nowadays. You have to understand that, yes, the people who listen to this channel have open minds, they've astral projected, they're interested in the topic, but there's a lot of people out there in these fields who are not open to this type of information. So it would all be for nothing. And those are just projections that I have no desire to waste in some vain attempt to help archaeologists. I'd love to be able to do it, and maybe if I knew an archaeologist, I could do it. But let's face it, just approaching some guy through email or text or calling him up and telling him a story about astral projection and how I found Atlantis or whatever, I'd be written off as a kook real quick. Next up is the whole meeting famous people from the past thing. Now, Richard gave some examples. Once again, JFK, the president who was assassinated. The World War II dictator, and Elvis. Of course, there's many other people. Some people like to read George Washington or Abraham Lincoln or Martin Luther King or who knows. The list is virtually endless. A lot of folks like to mention, they throw Jesus in there as well. Or you could throw in the Buddha or even, I don't know how the Muslims would feel about this. So I'm going to leave them out of it. But, certainly there's no limit to, that type of possibility of encountering famous people, heroes, what have you. Although they say you should never meet your heroes, you'll be disappointed. But, so the difficulties involved, and some of these I've mentioned before, but, there's so many new people and you have to remind folks of this stuff. Yes, it's possible. It's difficult, though. You have to get to the right time and place. Time projection, whether you're going into the future or the past, is a lot like throwing a dart at a dartboard blindfolded. If you're good at playing darts or astral projection, you'll hit the dartboard, even blindfolded. But going after that bullseye is going to be extremely difficult. In other words, if you aim for a year, and when I aim for a year, either in the past or the future, I know that I'm lucky if I get within hundreds of years in some cases of my actual target. And in many cases, it's impossible to tell whether you got close or not. Because, when you appear in a time, you might be hovering above the earth. You might be in a body of water, which happens at times. You might find yourself lying in a farmer's field, hovering over a city, hovering over a desert. My goodness, I've been in a lot of different places. I've never found myself inside the earth, though, thankfully. Maybe my astral self or my astral intelligence or subconscious knows that that's a no-no. So trying to locate the exact time and place where you can see that that famous person is going to be very difficult. What makes past time travel doubly difficult when compared to future travel is future travel, you're going to have more time to accomplish your purpose than time that actually elapses in the present. I've traveled thousands of years into the future and spent days, weeks, months, and longer there with only 10, 20 minutes going by here in the present. But it's the opposite in the past. In the past, you may use up 20 minutes here in the present, and all you have is just a handful of minutes in the past. So let's say you go back to see JFK, and let's say you actually get to the year 1963. It would be blind luck to be in November and in Dallas when Kennedy was there. That would be the most incredible luck of all luck. Because usually you might be dumped in 1963, if you're lucky, in Iowa. Okay, in which case you've got to try to figure out how to get to see JFK at that point and where he might be whenever it is you land. In the meantime, you only have a handful of minutes in the past before you get yanked back to the present. So it's extraordinarily difficult to achieve that type of tourism to the past. Okay, well, if you like this, please hit the like button, share it with those of like mind, subscribe if you haven't already, and something like 87% of you have, so I can't ask for too much more. Make sure that bell is solid so you're advised on Wednesdays and Saturdays when new episodes are posted. And please leave your questions and comments, and because I love that stuff. And as always, this is Rick, and I will see you on the astral plane.